I thought buying my first house would be the happiest moment of my life until my parents called to congratulate me. Their voices turned ice cold when they realized I had purchased it without consulting them first. My mother's tone cracked with pure fury as she revealed they had already promised my sister Amanda that she, her husband Derek, and their 3 young children could move into my future home to escape their mounting debt crisis. The conversation ended with my father delivering the most devastating blow I had ever heard from him. "You have destroyed this family's only hope, Sylvester, and we will never forgive you for this selfishness." 6 years of discipline and sacrifice led me to that moment. 6 years of living in a 400 square foot studio apartment with a Murphy bed and a mini refrigerator. 6 years of eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch while my coworkers ordered takeout. 6 years of walking to work instead of buying a car, saving every penny from my software engineering salary for one specific goal: owning my own home. The search process took 3 months of weekend house tours, mortgage applications, and sleepless nights calculating payments. When I found the 3-bedroom colonial on Maple Street with its white picket fence and mature oak trees, I knew immediately it was perfect. The previous owners had maintained it beautifully, and the neighborhood felt safe and welcoming. I could picture myself grilling burgers in the backyard and hosting friends for weekend barbecues. Signing the closing papers felt like winning the lottery. 28 years old, and finally a homeowner just like I had planned since college. The real estate agent handed me the keys with a smile, and I drove straight to the house just to sit in the driveway and absorb the reality. This was mine. Every mortgage payment would build equity instead of disappearing into a landlord's pocket. That euphoria lasted exactly 3 days until my parents called. Their initial congratulations sounded forced, like they were reading from a script. When I described the house's features and location expecting enthusiasm, silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, my mother spoke with barely controlled rage. "Sylvester, how could you make such a major decision without discussing it with your family first?" The question caught me off guard. "Mom, I'm 28 years old. Adults buy houses without needing parental permission." "This isn't about permission," my father interrupted, his voice rising. "This is about family responsibility and keeping your commitments." "What commitments? I never made any commitments about my housing choices." That's when the truth exploded out of them. Amanda and Derek were facing eviction. Derek had lost his construction job 8 months ago, and they were 3 months behind on rent. My parents had promised them that when I bought a house, there would be room for Amanda's family to live temporarily while Derek found new employment. "We told them they could count on you," my mother said, her voice breaking. "Amanda has been planning this move for months. The children are so excited about having their own bedrooms again." My head spun trying to process this information. "You promised them my house before I even bought it without asking me." "We assumed you would understand family comes first," my father replied coldly. "Apparently we were wrong about your character." The call ended with accusations flying from both directions. I hung up feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach, questioning everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my parents. 2 hours later, Amanda stood at my apartment door, sobbing hysterically. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she clutched a tissue box like a lifeline. Without invitation, she pushed past me into the small space. "How could you do this to us, Sylvester? How could you betray your own family?" Her accusation stung because I genuinely had no idea what she was talking about. "Amanda, I never made any agreements about anyone living in my house. This is the first time anyone mentioned this arrangement." She stared at me with genuine shock, as if I had claimed the sky was green. "That's impossible. Mom and Dad have been talking about this for months. They showed us pictures of houses you were considering and discussed which bedrooms would work best for the kids." A chill ran down my spine. They showed you pictures of houses I was looking at. Of course they did. Dad said you were keeping them updated on your search process so we could prepare for the move. Amanda's voice grew more agitated. Derek has been planning his job search around neighborhoods near your potential houses. We've been telling our landlord we would be moving out next month. The pieces started forming a terrifying picture. My parents had been monitoring my house hunting activities somehow and making promises based on assumptions about my decisions. They had involved Amanda and Derek in detailed plans for moving into property I had never agreed to share. Amanda, I need you to understand something very clearly. I never agreed to let anyone live in my house. My parents made promises they had no authority to make. Her expression shifted from confusion to rage. You're lying. Nobody would be that cruel to their own family. Derek has been out of work for months. Our landlord is threatening eviction next week. The kids don't understand why we might have to move to a homeless shelter. The conversation continued in circles for another hour. Amanda refused to accept that our parents had created this situation through unauthorized promises. She kept insisting I was breaking commitments I'd never made, and her desperation made logical discussion impossible. As she prepared to leave, Amanda mentioned something that made my blood freeze. Derek said not to worry because Dad showed him the loan papers with your new address already on them. He said everything was already legally arranged. After she left, I sat in my empty apartment staring at the wall. Loan papers with my address. What loan papers? I had financed my house independently through my bank with my own credit and income. My parents had no involvement in my mortgage process. But if there were loan papers with my address that my parents had shown Derek, it meant they had been making financial commitments using my property as some kind of collateral or reference. The implications terrified me more than I wanted to admit. Sunday morning, I drove to my parents' house demanding answers. The modest ranch home where I grew up looked smaller than I remembered, with faded siding and an overgrown front yard. My father's truck sat in the driveway, with rust spots spreading across the hood, and the mailbox leaned precariously to one side. My mother answered the door with red-rimmed eyes and defensive posture. I suppose you've come to gloat about choosing strangers over your own blood. I came for explanations. Amanda mentioned loan papers with my address. What loan papers? She stepped aside reluctantly, and I entered the living room, where my father sat, hunched over stacks of documents spread across the coffee table. His hair had grayed considerably since my last visit, and deep worry lines creased his forehead. Dad, what's going on here? What are these papers? He looked up with exhaustion and defeat written across his face. Sit down, son. We need to tell you some things we should have explained sooner. The story unfolded like a nightmare. Derek had convinced my parents to co-sign multiple high-interest loans for his contracting business ventures over the past 2 years. Each loan had seemed reasonable individually, but combined they totaled $47,000 across various creditors. He said his business was expanding rapidly and just needed temporary capital for equipment and supplies, my mother explained tearfully. He showed us contracts for big construction projects and promised he could pay everything back within 6 months. None of those projects materialized. Derek's business failed spectacularly, leaving my parents responsible for debt payments they could never afford on their fixed retirement income. They had already refinanced their house twice, trying to manage the payments, and foreclosure notices were arriving monthly. That's terrible, but what does this have to do with my house? I asked, though dread was already building in my stomach. My father reluctantly retrieved a manila folder from his desk and placed it in front of me. Derek suggested we could consolidate some of these debts by including family assets in refinancing arrangements. He said it was standard practice for families to combine resources during financial difficulties. I opened the folder and felt the world tilt sideways. The documents contained preliminary housing agreements, loan applications, and financial statements that included my income information, employment details, and the address of my new house. At the bottom of several papers, I found signatures that looked exactly like mine, but that I had never written. "These are forgeries," I whispered, staring at my supposedly signed name. My parents exchanged guilty glances. "Derek said those were just preliminary documents to show lenders that family support was available," my mother said weakly. "He said you would obviously agree to help once you understood the situation, so preparing the paperwork in advance would speed up the process." "You let Derek forge my signature on financial documents?" "We didn't think of it as forgery," my father protested. "We thought of it as family cooperation. Derek said this kind of thing happens all the time, and lawyers could make everything official later once you were involved in the discussions." I flipped through more papers, each one more devastating than the last. Loan applications listing my salary and new property address. Letters from creditors expecting payments that would come from family consolidation of assets. Preliminary agreements for home equity loans against my property that I had never authorized. "How long has this been going on?" "About 4 months," my mother admitted. "Derek started helping us organize our financial situation after Christmas, and he said including your information would give us better options with lenders." The betrayal cut deeper than I had imagined possible. My own parents had allowed someone to impersonate me on legal documents and make me liable for debts I knew nothing about. They had treated my identity, my income, and my property as family resources they could commit without my knowledge or consent. "Do you understand what you've done? These documents make me legally responsible for payments I never agreed to. Derek has committed identity theft and fraud using information you provided." My parents looked genuinely shocked by my anger, as if they truly believed their actions were reasonable family cooperation rather than serious crimes. Their desperation had blinded them to the reality of what they were enabling. "We just needed help, Sylvester," my father said plaintively. "We were drowning in debt, and Derek said this was the only way to keep the family together. We thought you would want to help us avoid losing our home." I gathered the forged documents and stood to leave. "I do want to help you avoid losing your home, but not through fraud and identity theft. You need to contact these creditors immediately and explain that my signatures are unauthorized. And you need to cut all contact with Derek before he destroys what's left of this family's finances." As I reached the door, my mother called after me with desperation in her voice. "What about Amanda and the children? What are they supposed to do now?" I turned back with a heavy heart. "They're supposed to find legal solutions to their problems instead of building their plans around stolen money and forged documents. And you're supposed to protect your children from criminals instead of helping them commit crimes." The drive home felt endless as I contemplated the scope of my parents' betrayal and Derek's manipulation. But worse fears were building in my mind. If Derek had been forging my signature for months, what other damage might he have done to my financial life? Monday morning, I took emergency leave from work and called Jonathan Miller, the attorney who had handled my house closing. His law office occupied the second floor of a converted Victorian mansion downtown, with polished hardwood floors and floor-to-ceiling law books that usually impressed clients. Today, the formal atmosphere felt ominous as I spread the forged documents across his mahogany conference table. Jonathan studied each paper carefully, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. His expressions grew more serious with each document, and he occasionally whistled low under his breath. After 30 minutes of review, he leaned back in his leather chair and delivered the verdict I had been dreading. "Sylvester, this is much worse than typical family financial disputes. These documents constitute systematic identity theft and fraud. Your brother-in-law has created financial obligations that could take years and tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees to resolve completely." My stomach dropped. "How is that possible? I never signed anything or authorized any of these transactions." "The problem is proving that in court. Derek has created a paper trail suggesting family financial cooperation, and some of these creditors may have already begun collection proceedings based on these documents. Even though the signatures are forged, untangling the legal mess will require extensive litigation. Jonathan explained that each forged document would require separate legal challenges, expert handwriting analysis, and court proceedings to void the fraudulent obligations. The process could cost between $15,000 and $30,000 in attorney fees, assuming the cases proceeded smoothly without complications. My first recommendation is that you immediately contact your bank and credit monitoring services to check for additional, unauthorized activity. If Derek has been forging your signature for months, there may be other financial damage you haven't discovered yet. I left Jonathan's office feeling sick to my stomach and drove straight to my bank. The customer service representative, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, with kind eyes and a reassuring manner, pulled up my accounts on her computer and began scrolling through recent activity. "Everything looks normal for your checking and savings accounts," she said initially. "No unauthorized transactions or unusual patterns. But let me run a broader credit check to see if there's been any activity across other financial institutions." She typed commands into her terminal, waited for responses, and then frowned at the screen. "Oh my. Mr. Sylvester, you have some significant credit activity that might be concerning. 3 new credit card accounts were opened in your name over the past 4 months." The room seemed to spin around me. "That's impossible. I haven't applied for any new credit cards." Patricia printed detailed credit reports and handed them across her desk. "The applications came from different banks, but they all used your social security number and employment information. The statements have been sent to a post office box rather than your home address." I stared at the papers in disbelief. Derek had opened credit accounts with Chase Capital One and Discover using my personal information. The total credit limits exceeded $25,000, and he had already charged over $18,000 across the 3 cards. The purchases include contractor tools, building supplies, household furniture, and electronics. Patricia continued reading from the detailed transaction lists. "Automatic payment arrangements have been set up to draw from your checking account, but they haven't activated yet because the cards haven't reached their minimum payment due dates." My head pounded as the full scope of Derek's theft became clear. He hadn't just forged documents for my parents' debts. He had been systematically stealing my identity for months to fund his failed business and personal expenses. "There's something else," Patricia said hesitantly. "According to these records, someone attempted to contact your mortgage lender last Friday to add an authorized user to your home loan account." Friday, 2 days after I had closed on the house. What kind of authorized user? The inquiry came from someone claiming to be your business partner, requesting access for property management purposes. The caller provided your mortgage account number and personal information, but the lender declined to make changes without your direct authorization and physical presence. Derek had tried to gain control over my mortgage just days after I bought the house. If he had succeeded, he could have accessed my home equity modified payment arrangements or even initiated refinancing without my knowledge. "Patricia, I need to place fraud alerts on all my accounts immediately, and I need documentation of all this unauthorized activity for my attorney." She spent the next 2 hours helping me secure my financial accounts and print comprehensive records of Derek's fraudulent activities. The evidence was overwhelming systematic identity theft, credit fraud, and attempted mortgage manipulation that began months before I even knew Derek was having financial problems. As I prepared to leave the bank, Patricia offered one final warning. "Mr. Sylvester, identity thieves often escalate their activities when they sense discovery. You should monitor your accounts daily and consider changing your address with all financial institutions to prevent mail theft." I drove home with my head spinning from the magnitude of Derek's betrayal. This wasn't desperate behavior from someone facing temporary hardship. This was calculated criminal activity that had been planned and executed over many months. Derek had been systematically positioning himself to take over my financial life entirely. But the worst revelation was still coming. When I checked my home security system later that evening, I discovered someone had been at my new house while I was at the bank. Fresh tire tracks marked the driveway, and several windows showed fingerprints that hadn't been there the day before. Derek wasn't just stealing my money anymore, he was preparing to steal my home. Tuesday evening, my mother called with forced cheerfulness in her voice. "Sylvester, honey, your father and I think this situation has gotten out of hand. We're organizing a family meeting tomorrow night so everyone can talk through these misunderstandings calmly. Mom, these aren't misunderstandings. Derek committed serious crimes using my identity, and you helped him do it. That's exactly the kind of attitude we need to address," she replied firmly. "Your grandparents are driving up from Phoenix, and your aunts and uncles are coming too. Everyone is very concerned about how this conflict is tearing our family apart." I tried to explain that Derek's criminal behavior was what had torn the family apart, but she interrupted with increasing agitation. "We've told everyone how you're refusing to help Amanda and the children during their time of need. They're very disappointed in your selfishness, and they want to talk sense into you." The family meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock Wednesday evening at my parents' house. I considered not attending, but my attorney advised that demonstrating good faith efforts to resolve family conflicts would strengthen my position if criminal charges became necessary. I arrived to find cars parked up and down the block. My grandparents' ancient Buick occupied the driveway alongside my Uncle Robert's pickup truck and my Aunt Linda's minivan. Through the living room windows, I could see relatives packed shoulder to shoulder in folding chairs arranged in a circle. My grandmother Dorothy opened the front door with tears already streaming down her weathered cheeks. At 83, she commanded enormous respect within our family, and her disappointment cut deeper than any anger could have. "Oh, Sylvester," she said, pulling me into a fragile hug. "How did our sweet boy become so hardened against his own blood?" Inside, 15 relatives had gathered like a tribunal. My grandfather sat rigidly upright in the place of honor, his military bearing still impressive, despite his 86 years. Around the circle, aunts, uncles, and cousins watched me with expressions ranging from disappointment to barely concealed hostility. My father called the meeting to order with somber formality. "Everyone here loves you, Sylvester, but we're deeply concerned about your recent behavior toward Amanda and her children. We hope tonight we can help you remember what family means." For the next hour, relatives took turns sharing their perspectives on family loyalty and sacrifice. My Uncle Robert described how relatives had helped him avoid foreclosure during the economic recession. My Aunt Linda talked about the importance of protecting children during family crises. My cousin James shared stories about families who had overcome financial hardship through cooperation and mutual support. Each speech felt like a dagger through my heart, because everyone genuinely believed I was selfishly abandoning my sister's family during their desperate time of need. My parents had carefully framed the situation to hide Derek's criminal behavior and present me as the unreasonable family member breaking long-standing commitments. My grandfather spoke last with the authority of family patriarch. During the Great Depression, families survived by sharing everything: homes, food, income, and hope. Nobody asked whether it was convenient or fair. They asked what the family needed to survive. Your sister's family needs shelter, and you have shelter to provide. The choice should be obvious to any decent man. His words shattered my resolve. These people had traveled hundreds of miles because they genuinely believed I was betraying fundamental family values. They had no idea about the forgery, identity theft, or fraud that had created this crisis. I tried to explain about Derek's criminal activities, but my family interpreted my accusations as desperate attempts to justify selfish behavior. When I mentioned forged signatures and stolen credit cards, my relatives exchanged concerned glances as if I were having mental health problems. "Sylvester, honey." My Aunt Linda said gently, "Families help each other with financial arrangements all the time. Derek isn't some stranger. He's your brother-in-law. These legal technicalities you're worried about can be sorted out later, but Amanda's children need stability right now. The intervention continued until nearly 10 o'clock with relatives pressing me to do the right thing and remember my Christian values and think about what really matters in life. The emotional pressure was overwhelming, especially coming from people I loved and respected. Just as I was beginning to waver, Derek arrived fashionably late, with an apologetic smile and casual confidence that immediately set my teeth on edge. He wore clean work clothes and carried a toolbox, as if he had just finished an honest day's labor instead of committing felony fraud. "Sorry, I'm running behind, folks," he announced cheerfully. I was finishing up some work at the new house and lost track of time. The room fell silent. "What new house?" I asked slowly. Derek's smile widened. "Your house, of course. Amanda and I have been moving some things into the guest bedroom just like we discussed. I want to thank you for coming around and realizing family comes first." My vision blurred with rage. "We never discussed anything. You don't have permission to be in my house." "Well, your parents gave me the keys as family representatives, so I figured everything was settled." Derek produced a set of keys from his pocket and jingled them casually. "Amanda's already got the kids' beds set up in the back bedrooms, and I've been using the garage for my tools and equipment. It's working out perfectly." The blood drained from my face as I realized what had happened. While I was dealing with lawyers and banks, Derek had simply taken possession of my house through pure audacity and my parents' enabling. He had moved his family in during my absence and was now claiming residence under local tenant protection laws. I bolted from the family meeting without explanation and drove directly to my house. Every light was on, and Derek's pickup truck sat confidently in my driveway. Through the windows, I could see children's toys scattered across my living room floor, and Amanda's belongings draped over my furniture. Derek answered my furious knocking with infuriating calm. "Come on in, brother. Welcome to your new housemates." The smell of cooking dinner filled my kitchen, where Amanda stood at my stove preparing a meal as if she belonged there. My guest bedrooms had been transformed into children's rooms with bunk beds, stuffed animals, and cartoon posters covering the walls I had just painted. "You need to leave immediately," I said through gritted teeth. "This is breaking and entering." Derek chuckled and pulled out his phone. "Actually, I checked with a legal aid attorney this afternoon. Since your parents provided access as family representatives, and we've established residence with personal belongings and mail delivery, we have tenant rights under Michigan law. You can't just throw us out on the street without proper eviction procedures." He showed me printed pages from a legal website explaining tenant protections for people who establish residency with landlord permission. Even though my parents had no legal authority to grant such permission, Derek's interpretation suggested the eviction process could take 60 to 90 days to complete. "The best part," Derek continued smugly, "is that you can't shut off utilities or change locks or interfere with our peaceful enjoyment of the premises during the eviction process. We've got legal protections that keep us here until a court says otherwise." I stood in my own kitchen watching Derek's children eat dinner at my table while Amanda organized my cabinets, and Derek explained how he had outsmarted me using legal technicalities and my parents' misguided cooperation. This had been his plan all along. Manufacture a family crisis, manipulate my parents into providing access, then use legal protections to establish permanent residence regardless of my consent. He had turned my family's love against me and weaponized the legal system to steal my home through systematic deception. But Derek had made one crucial mistake in his overconfidence. His illegal activities were about to catch up with him in ways he never anticipated. Thursday morning, I met again with my attorney, Jonathan Miller, this time bringing photographs of Derek's occupation of my house and recordings of his admission that he was claiming tenant rights without my consent. Jonathan studied the evidence carefully while I explained the previous evening's disaster. "The good news is that Derek's tenant claims are fraudulent since your parents had no legal authority to grant residence permissions," Jonathan said. "The bad news is that formal eviction proceedings will take 60 to 90 days, even with fraudulent tenancy, and Derek clearly understands how to manipulate the system." Jonathan explained that emergency eviction was only possible under specific circumstances, immediate danger to property, illegal activities on the premises, or violations of lease terms that threatened other residents. Since Derek had established what appeared to be legitimate residency, standard eviction procedures would apply unless we could prove criminal activity occurring on the property. However, Jonathan continued with growing interest. If Derek is conducting any illegal business activities from your house that would immediately void any tenant protections and enable emergency eviction with police assistance. I described Derek's toolbox and mention of working at the house, but Jonathan needed concrete evidence of illegal activity to justify emergency action. He advised me to document everything happening on my property while being careful not to violate Derek's claimed tenant rights by interfering with his activities. That afternoon, I purchased a comprehensive security camera system and spent hours installing wireless cameras around my property perimeter. The cameras provided high-definition video with night vision capabilities, motion detection alerts, and remote monitoring through my smartphone. If Derek was conducting illegal business from my house, I would capture evidence of it. Friday evening brought the first significant breakthrough. My phone buzzed with a motion alert from the garage camera, showing Derek's pickup truck backing up to my garage door at 8:30. I watched through live video as Derek opened my garage and began unloading construction materials and power tools from his truck bed. Over the next 2 hours, Derek made multiple trips carrying lumber, copper pipes, electrical conduits, and expensive tools into my garage. Several items looked brand new with manufacturer tags still attached, while others showed heavy wear, suggesting previous use on job sites. Saturday morning brought more activity. Derek's phone rang constantly while he organized materials in my garage, and I could hear him discussing prices and delivery arrangements through the security audio. By noon, 2 different pickup trucks had arrived to purchase items from Derek's inventory, with cash transactions happening in my driveway. I called Jonathan with updates about Derek's apparent business operations, but he cautioned that selling personal property wasn't necessarily illegal, even if conducted from residential premises. We needed evidence of stolen goods, unlicensed business activity, or violations of local ordinances to justify emergency eviction. The breakthrough came Sunday afternoon when Derek received a delivery that made my blood run cold. A nervous-looking young man arrived driving a battered Honda Civic and unloaded several boxes of copper fittings and electrical outlets. Their conversation, captured clearly by my security system, revealed the devastating truth about Derek's business model. "This stuff is definitely clean, right?" the delivery driver asked nervously. "I can't afford to get caught with hot materials again." Derek laughed confidently. "Everything I sell comes from legitimate sources, my friend. These supplies were just surplus from completed jobs, totally legal." But I recognized several items from neighborhood social media posts about recent burglaries. Mrs. Patterson had posted photos of electrical outlets stolen from her garage workshop. Mr. Chen had reported copper fittings taken from his basement renovation project. Derek wasn't just selling surplus materials. He was operating a fence for stolen construction supplies. Monday morning, I called the local police non-emergency number and spoke with Detective Sarah Williams about suspected stolen property being stored on my premises. She agreed to meet Tuesday afternoon to review my security footage and discuss the situation. Detective Williams arrived promptly at 2 o'clock, a professional woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. She spent an hour reviewing my security recordings while taking detailed notes about Derek's activities and the items being stored in my garage. Several of these items matched descriptions from recent burglary reports, she confirmed. The copper fittings and electrical outlets are identical to materials stolen from 3 different properties over the past month. We've been investigating these thefts, but we hadn't identified a distribution point until now. She explained that Derek appeared to be running a sophisticated operation, receiving stolen goods from multiple sources and reselling them to contractors looking for discounted supplies. The steady stream of buyers and sellers indicated regular business operations rather than casual transactions. The best part for your situation, Detective Williams continued, is that operating an illegal business from residential premises, especially involving stolen property, voids any tenant protections Derek might claim. We can obtain a search warrant for your garage and arrest Derek for receiving stolen property, which will enable immediate eviction proceedings. We scheduled the search warrant execution for Thursday morning when Derek would likely be present to receive new inventory. Detective Williams warned me to maintain normal routines and avoid alerting Derek to the investigation since flight risk was high once criminals suspected police involvement. Tuesday and Wednesday crawled by slowly as I watched Derek continue his illegal operations while planning his downfall. He had become increasingly confident and careless, conducting transactions in broad daylight and keeping minimal security around his stolen inventory. Wednesday evening. Derek knocked on what had been my front door with characteristic smugness. "Sylvester, I want to discuss expanding my business operations here. Your garage is perfect for my needs, and I'm willing to pay rent for exclusive use of the space." The audacity was breathtaking. Derek wanted to formalize his theft of my property by paying rent to operate his criminal enterprise from my garage. His confidence suggested he believed he had permanent control over my house and could negotiate terms for his illegal activities. "Derek, you're not paying rent because you're not staying here permanently," I replied carefully. "This arrangement is temporary until you find your own place." He chuckled and shook his head. "Brother, I think you misunderstand the legal situation. We've established residency with tenant rights, and Amanda's pregnant again, so we need stability for the children. This is our home now, and you're welcome to live here too, as long as you respect our family's needs." Amanda was pregnant. Derek was planning to anchor his family permanently in my house by adding another child to complicate any eviction proceedings. His criminal activities were escalating, along with his domestic manipulation, creating multiple layers of legal and emotional complications designed to trap me in his schemes. But Thursday morning would bring justice that Derek never saw coming. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, with autumn winds stripping the last leaves from my oak trees. I sat in my car across the street from my own house, watching Detective Williams coordinate with 4 uniformed officers positioned around the property perimeter. The search warrant was scheduled for execution at 9 o'clock, when Derek typically began his daily inventory activities. At exactly 9:15, Derek's pickup truck pulled into my driveway with another load of suspicious materials. He seemed completely unaware of the police presence as he backed up to the garage door and began unloading copper pipes and electrical fixtures that matched recent burglary reports. Detective Williams waited until Derek had carried several boxes into the garage before giving the signal. 4 officers converged on the property simultaneously, while Detective Williams approached the front door with the search warrant. I couldn't hear the conversation from my distance, but Derek's body language shifted dramatically from casual confidence to obvious panic. Amanda appeared at the door holding her youngest child, and her expression showed genuine shock at the police presence. The garage search took less than 30 minutes to uncover overwhelming evidence. Officers photographed items that matched stolen property reports, documented Derek's pricing lists and buyer contact information, and seized records of his illegal business operations. The stolen materials alone exceeded $15,000 in value, making the charges felony-level offenses. Derek was arrested for receiving stolen property, operating an unlicensed business, and violation of residential zoning ordinances. As officers led him to the patrol car in handcuffs, he maintained his innocence while threatening legal action against everyone involved in his arrest. "This is harassment," he shouted toward my car, somehow spotting me among the neighborhood spectators. "I'm going to sue you for false imprisonment and malicious prosecution. You'll regret destroying my family over petty jealousy." But Derek's threats were interrupted by an unexpected development that changed everything. Amanda emerged from the house carrying a large envelope and approached Detective Williams with obvious distress. "Officer, I need to give you something that might help your investigation," Amanda said with tears streaming down her face. "I've been collecting evidence about Derek's activities for months, but I didn't know how to come forward without putting my children at risk." Detective Williams accepted the envelope and began reviewing its contents while Amanda explained her situation. She had discovered Derek's theft and fraud activities several months earlier, but felt trapped by their financial dependence and his threats to abandon the family if she interfered with his business operations. "I started recording his phone conversations and photographing documents when I realized he was stealing from job sites," Amanda continued. "When I found out he was using Sylvester's identity to open credit accounts, I knew I had to document everything, but I was terrified of what Derek would do if he found out." The envelope contained dozens of photographs showing Derek with stolen materials, audio recordings of him discussing illegal transactions, and copies of credit card statements for accounts opened in my name. Amanda had been systematically documenting Derek's criminal activities while appearing to support his schemes. "I drew the line when Derek started talking about using Sylvester's house for permanent business operations," Amanda explained to Detective Williams. "I couldn't let him destroy my brother's life to cover up his own failures, even if it meant my children and I would lose everything." Amanda's evidence transformed the case from simple property theft to comprehensive identity fraud and racketeering. The recordings revealed Derek's connections to other criminals who supplied stolen materials, his systematic theft from previous employers, and his long-term plans to expand illegal operations using my house as headquarters. Detective Williams called for additional units to process the expanded crime scene, while Amanda continued providing information about Derek's criminal network. Her cooperation enabled police to identify multiple victims of Derek's identity theft schemes and recover evidence connecting him to burglaries across 3 counties. The stolen money Derek had charged to my fraudulent credit accounts was traceable through Amanda's documentation, enabling rapid recovery through asset forfeiture procedures. Derek's truck tools and personal property would be seized to compensate victims of his crimes, and my financial damages could be recovered through the criminal restitution process. Most importantly, Amanda's evidence proved Derek's criminal intent and systematic planning, ensuring he would face significant prison time that would prevent future schemes against my family or other victims. As police finished processing the scene, Amanda approached me with obvious shame and remorse. "Sylvester, I owe you an apology that I can never adequately express. I knew Derek was destroying your life, but I felt trapped by circumstances that seemed impossible to escape. Amanda, you did the right thing by documenting his crimes and coming forward. That took incredible courage, especially with your children's welfare at stake." She nodded tearfully. "Derek threatened to disappear and leave us with nothing if I interfered with his business activities. But when I realized he was planning to permanently take over your house and expand his criminal operations, I knew I had to choose between enabling his destruction or protecting what was left of our family's integrity." Amanda's children were confused and frightened by the police activity, so I helped her pack essential belongings while explaining they could stay at my parents' house temporarily while she sorted out legal and financial arrangements. Derek's arrest meant Amanda qualified for emergency assistance programs that would help her establish independent housing and childcare while pursuing divorce proceedings. The legal victory provided immediate relief from Derek's occupation of my house, but more importantly, it demonstrated that criminals like Derek ultimately face consequences for their choices, no matter how cleverly they manipulate family relationships or legal technicalities to avoid responsibility. Derek's confidence and smugness evaporated completely when he realized the scope of evidence against him and the prison sentence he would face for his crimes. His manipulation and threats were powerless against documented proof of systematic criminal behavior that had harmed multiple victims. But the real satisfaction came from knowing that Amanda had found the courage to choose justice over enabling even when that choice required enormous personal sacrifice and uncertainty about her family's future. 6 months later, Derek was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for identity theft fraud and racketeering charges stemming from his systematic criminal activities. The judge noted during sentencing that Derek had shown no remorse for his crimes and had attempted to blame his victims for his choices, demonstrating a complete lack of accountability that justified maximum penalties. The criminal conviction enabled rapid resolution of all fraudulent financial obligations created through Derek's schemes. My credit report was cleared of all unauthorized accounts. The forged loan documents were voided through court orders, and I received restitution covering my attorney fees and financial damages with interest. Amanda followed through on her divorce proceedings and received full custody of her children, along with protection orders preventing Derek from contacting the family during his incarceration. She enrolled in community college nursing programs while receiving housing assistance and childcare support that enabled her to build genuine independence for the first time in years. My parents faced the difficult reality of their enabling behavior and began attending financial counseling to address their debt crisis through legitimate means rather than fraud and manipulation. They sold their house to pay off the debts Derek had created and moved to a modest apartment, but they retained their dignity and avoided bankruptcy through careful budgeting and honest financial planning. The hardest conversation came when my parents visited my house to apologize sincerely for their role in Derek's schemes. My father sat at my kitchen table with tears in his eyes as he acknowledged how desperation had blinded him to the severity of what they were enabling. "Son, we thought we were helping family during a crisis, but we realize now that we were enabling criminal behavior that could have destroyed your entire future," he said with obvious shame. "We should have protected you from Derek instead of helping him commit crimes against you." My mother struggled even more with guilt over their choices. "I keep thinking about how Derek manipulated our love for Amanda and the children to make us accomplices in stealing from our own son. We failed you as parents by choosing enabling over accountability." Their apologies felt genuine, and I could see they had learned important lessons about the difference between helping family members and enabling destructive behavior. We began rebuilding our relationship slowly with clear boundaries about financial discussions and mutual respect for individual autonomy. The experience taught me valuable lessons about protecting personal achievements while maintaining compassion for family members facing legitimate struggles. I established a small education fund to help Amanda with college expenses and emergency childcare, but with clear legal protections and boundaries that prevented future exploitation. Amanda and I developed a healthier relationship built on honesty and mutual respect rather than family obligation and guilt manipulation. She expressed genuine gratitude for my support during her transition to independence, but she never expected or demanded assistance as an entitlement. The most satisfying outcome was watching Amanda flourish once freed from Derek's control and manipulation. She proved capable of remarkable resilience and responsibility when given opportunities to succeed through honest effort rather than criminal schemes. Her children adapted well to stable housing, and their mothers increased confidence and optimism about their future. My house finally became the sanctuary I had envisioned when I first signed those mortgage papers. I hosted weekend barbecues with friends and colleagues, decorated rooms according to my preferences, and enjoyed the pride of home ownership without fear or guilt about family drama. The security cameras remained installed as a reminder that protecting achievements requires vigilance against people who would exploit family relationships for personal gain. But I also learned that standing firm against manipulation and enabling ultimately helps everyone involved find healthier solutions to their problems. 6 months after Derek's sentencing, I organized a housewarming party that included friends, co-workers, and reformed family members who respected boundaries and celebrated achievements rather than trying to exploit them. Amanda brought her children to play in the backyard while she studied nursing textbooks at my patio table. My parents attended with obvious pride in my accomplishments and gratitude for my forgiveness, but also with clear understanding that family relationships must be built on mutual respect rather than obligation and manipulation. They had learned to ask for help honestly rather than demanding it through guilt and deception. The party felt like a true celebration of victory over adversity, not because I had defeated family members, but because we had all learned to choose accountability over enabling honesty, over manipulation, and healthy boundaries over destructive obligation. The life lesson became crystal clear as I watched my nephew and nieces play safely in my backyard, while Amanda pursued legitimate education and my parents rebuilt their finances through honest means. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is refuse to enable their destructive choices, even when it temporarily causes pain. Because true family relationships must be built on honesty, respect, and mutual responsibility, rather than manipulation and exploitation. When people we love are drowning in problems created by poor choices, our instinct is often to throw them a life preserver, even if it means drowning ourselves. But real love sometimes requires standing on shore and refusing to enable their self-destructive behavior until they choose to swim towards safety themselves. Derek faced the consequences of his criminal choices and learned that manipulating family relationships cannot protect him from accountability forever. Amanda discovered her own strength and capability when freed from an abusive relationship built on dependency and fear. My parents learned to distinguish between helping family and enabling criminal behavior that ultimately harms everyone involved. The experience transformed our family dynamics from obligation-based manipulation to respect-based cooperation, where assistance is offered freely rather than demanded through guilt, and where boundaries are maintained to protect everyone's welfare rather than enabling destructive patterns. Now, as I sit on my front porch watching the sunset paint my oak trees golden, I understand that protecting your achievements from exploitation isn't selfish. It's necessary for maintaining the strength and resources needed to genuinely help family members who are ready to help themselves through honest effort and accountability. What would you have done if you discovered your own family members had been enabling someone to commit identity theft and fraud against you? Have you ever had to choose between family harmony and protecting yourself from financial destruction? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with your own experiences with family boundaries and financial protection, please like this video and share it with anyone who might benefit from learning about the importance of standing firm against manipulation disguised as family obligation. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming family drama and protecting your achievements from people who would exploit your success for their own gain. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you recognize that choosing accountability over enabling is sometimes the most loving gift you can give to family members who need to learn healthier ways of solving their problems.